I'm now going to spend about half an hour or so moving us right up to the present day with some thoughts that I hope will flow somewhat naturally from that longer-term perspective. And I want to move on to trying to do something which half an hour doesn't really encompass it, but that's what we've got, so I have to make do, which is trying to explain some of the important aspects of the contradictions. And actually, that term in Chinese, Mao Zedong, is a really good way to try and understand the complexity of what modern China is, contemporary China. It is a society that is open, but also highly authoritarian. It is a society that is globalized, but also highly keen to throw up walls, both virtual and real, in various ways. So a whole variety of complexities about one of the most important societies on earth, in which, I would remind you, amongst other things, we see the world's second biggest economy, possibly become the first in a few years, we don't know yet. At the moment, the world's largest population, the world's second largest military, one has to say, and also, of course, depending how you count it, something like a fifth to a quarter of all of humanity within the territory of the People's Republic of China. And when you include diaspora, ethnic Chinese communities around the world, one of the most important and vibrant cultural networks anywhere in the world. So without any further delay, let's get on to the man who, amongst other things, defines, I think, China in the 2020s, certainly in terms of the People's Republic of China, and that is, of course, the President of China, and perhaps rather more importantly, actually, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, Xi Jinping. And these two pics of Xi Jinping, I think in some ways are symbolic of the contradictions, the different aspects that I was talking about. So the one at the bottom is a picture of him in person back in 2017 at Davos. I don't know how many of you were there at Davos that year. I wasn't, I have to confess, but maybe some of you were hanging out. And Xi Jinping gave a speech there, which was all about how China was a globalizing, outward-looking power that would, in many ways, look to uphold the pillars of international order. Now, bearing in mind, he made that speech in January 2017, a time when a gentleman named Donald J. Trump was about to be inaugurated as President of the United States. So I think that while he never mentioned his name, most of President Xi's comments were really giving the nod to saying, I believe in globalization, I believe in openness, unlike that guy in Washington. And he said something not dissimilar, actually, this year, virtually at Davos in 2021. But of course, I gather that Davos this year was not, in fact, held in person. I mention that because there we have, at the top level there, the Great Hall of the People. And that is, of course, this hugely symbolic place where actually the great meetings, the congresses, all of that, in the Chinese Communist calendar are held over the months, years, and decades. And that's a very different Xi Jinping. Not different person, of course, but different message. Much more about China's place in the world, seeing China as a place that in some ways is not globalized and open and all the stuff that was said at Davos, but under siege. In many ways, trying to be fighting back against containment from the United States, from the Western world, from powers who basically want to see China fail. And he, in this version of the narrative, is about a China which is looking to use its economic power, its military power, its cultural power to push back and create an alternative Chinese vision, of course, of its place in wider society, but certainly one that is highly orchestrated and stabilized at home. So, inward-looking Communist Party of China, outward-looking Communist Party of China, different locations, Beijing and Davos. But it's not all about the leader. Let me use this, if I may, to put forward a little mnemonic, which I have written about, and if any of you want to look online in the journal Foreign Affairs, I had a piece back in January of this year which talks about this in more detail. But let me give you a quick summary of why I think what's on here, on this slide, is a useful way to try and understand the complexity of China today. And I've called it the China DNA model. It's not just supposed to be a kind of conventional wisdom or cliche, because we say that everything has, DNA, asking tough questions is in the DNA of guests at the How the Light Gets In festival, that sort of thing. But I meant something more specific. Do we have any Nobel Prize-winning biologists in the audience today? Okay, well, that's good. You don't have to be a Nobel Prize winner to know that if you look at an actual molecule of DNA, it's made up of 4 nucleotides, which have the initials of the chemicals ACGT. And I've realized actually that those DNA nucleotide initials are the same as the factors that I think make up today's China. And they are authoritarianism, consumerism, globalization, and technology. What do I mean by those terms? Authoritarianism. China today, actually really through most of its communist period, but much more explicitly today, has no embarrassment, no kind of awkwardness about saying we run a different sort of political system. We're not a liberal democracy. We're not looking to become a liberal democracy. You can say this is good, you can say this is bad. I'm just saying analytically, this is the way that China is presenting itself these days. It does sometimes make the odd gesture saying we're a different type of democracy, but that's a bit like those people who sell you those burgers, I think, which they say taste just like meat. I mean, that's like meat as long as it tastes like cabbage. But authoritarianism, I think, is just a straightforward, actually quite analytical way to look at the way in which China projects itself as a state that looks for a top-down government that does not look for pluralism in its system. Just, as I say, ticking boxes on that political science model. Second point, consumerism, not consumption, but consumerism. Sociology, not economics. If you look at all the reasons why the old Soviet Union never really managed to fulfill its project, there are a lot of reasons, but one of them was the inability to provide an attractive, consumer-driven lifestyle for its wider population. In the era of climate emergency, we may now be asking a lot of questions about whether providing a great consumer lifestyle for millions of people was necessarily always the best idea in the wider world, but leave that aside for the moment. The point is that China today has managed to create a consumerist aspiration that the Soviet Union never managed to do, unless you think that driving a Trabant or a Zhiguli while going along to a restaurant, which is sort of closed for most of the day and only open for about sort of 2 hours in the mid-afternoon, which was often the fate in the old Soviet Union, is an attractive consumer lifestyle. Today's middle-class Chinese with, their high-quality mobile phones and weekend trips to places like Hainan Island and their tropical lifestyle are clearly living something that all of us would recognize as a consumerist lifestyle. And the Chinese Communist Party is very upfront about saying, we gave you this is why you should support us. Third one, G, globalization, global ambition. China, until a couple of decades ago, was a place that basically kept itself broadly within its borders. Not entirely, a huge exporting country, of course, but there was a sort of clear distinction between the two. Now, China has a presence all over the world in various ways. Some of the obvious elements are its increasing importance in global governance. That's been highly controversial during the pandemic in terms of role at the United Nations and the World Health Organization. But whether it's for good or ill, the point is that China is in the world and very explicit about wanting to be in the world and shaping that world. And that brings us to the final factor, T, technology. And that is really the one that I think almost drives all the others these days. Because whether it's authoritarianism, the ability of China to be able to gather up huge amounts of data with very little government controls on what government can find out about you. Whether it's consumerism, where people are using Alipay on a daily basis and don't even touch banknotes and haven't done for years and years, or basically using huge new developments in artificial intelligence to change everything from shopping to the way that they work in the office. Or G, globalization. If in a world where in Latin America, large parts of sub-Saharan Africa, in Southeast Asia, Huawei, ZTE, major Chinese tech firms are providing an infrastructure that will then provide path dependency for future developments. All of these are aspects of something that wasn't true 25 years ago and is true now, which is that China has become a tech innovator, not first tier. For that, I think most people who work in this area, and there are a lot of them at this festival, would generally say, tell me if I'm wrong, that Silicon Valley still way outstrips everywhere else in terms of first tier invention from scratch, that ecology of Stanford University and Berkeley and all these startups and fantastic weather, all of this comes together somehow to create an amazing. Don't know, people. It didn't take off in Massachusetts because it snows the whole time in the winter. California, I assure you that I don't think it's snowed since about 1952 or something. And China has not managed to create, for a variety of reasons, that first-tier innovation at that level of game-changing change, but at very high second-tier, taking technology that exists and turning it into something quite unique and transformative. That is happening in Shenzhen, it's happening in Hangzhou, it's happening up in Haidian in northwest Beijing, and it's going to keep happening, I think, for a long time to come. So as DNA strands go, 4 pretty powerful ones. I will go as far as to say in human history, and even non-human history, I think, I haven't seen that combination with that level of power in any other parallel society that I can think of.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.